So thank you everybody for coming. I know there's a lot going on this weekend, and with the Mart happening and the show wrapping up here, I really appreciate you coming by for this. So Dave asked me to do another talk this year, and last year I talked about rare minerals of the Pikes Peak batholith, which kind of ties into my master's thesis research. And this year I thought I would stick with Colorado per Dave's recommendation, but kind of broaden the appeal a little bit by talking about minerals from the metallic ore deposits of Colorado, which we have many of. And this talk is by no means comprehensive. It's by no means detailed. I just wanted to do a quick overview of some of the outstanding minerals from our ore deposits here in Colorado. So a little bit of an overview of the talk. I'll start with some basic Colorado geology and some mining history. I'll do a brief overview of what the Colorado Mineral Belt is. And then I'm going to talk about the important mining districts here in Colorado. And this list is by no means comprehensive. I'm going to cover about a dozen different mining districts, but I just wanted to touch on some of the important districts we have here in Colorado and some of the minerals and the history of those districts. So a little bit of geology overview of Colorado, and I know the slide's a little dense. I'm not going to read everything here. The biggest thing to think of when you think of Colorado geologically is that there are three major physiographic provinces here in the state. There's the Great Plains, which makes up eastern Colorado, and this is dominantly sedimentary rocks younger than about 60 million years. There's the Rocky Mountains, which is central Colorado and covers much of the state. This is dominated by igneous and metamorphic rocks. These range in age from 2.7 billion down to as young as 20 or 30 million. And then in the southwest part of the state, there's the San Juan volcanic field, and this dominates southwest Colorado. It's a huge volcanic field made up of eruptive igneous rocks that are fairly young, 10 up to about 35 million years old. The oldest rocks in Colorado, what we call the basement, is dominated by 1.7 billion year old metamorphic rock, and these are dominantly what we call metapolitic rocks, meaning that they were basically metamorphosed sediment, oceanic sediments. And these formed during an event we call the Yavapai orogeny back in the Precambrian, about 1.7 billion years ago. There's a little bit of older stuff that belongs to the Wyoming Craton that's 2.7 billion years old, but most of it's the 1.7 billion year old stuff. So these rocks were intruded by a suite of Precambrian granites, and these are granites that we call so-called A-type granites. So they have a certain chemical signature, they have a certain tectonic environment they occur in. And these include some well-known rocks like the Pikes Peak granite and the Silver Plume granite, which are both kind of famous for minerals. After that, in the Paleozoic, you had a lot of sedimentary rocks being deposited. So things like the Leadville limestone and the Maroon Formation and the Fountain Formation. And some of these, like the Leadville limestone, are actually quite important for our mineral deposits as far as being host rocks. This was followed at about 300 million years ago by the uplift of the ancestral Rocky Mountains, which predated the modern Rocky Mountains. And during this period, the climate was generally fairly wet, and there were a lot of shallow seas between the ancestral Rocky Mountains, and that's where some of those Paleozoic sedimentary rocks are forming. The modern uplift of the Rocky Mountains did not really start until about 80 or 70 million years ago, and the timing is sort of debated for that. The reason for the uplift of the Rocky Mountains is also debated. People now believe that it's related to something called the Farallon Plate Detachment, which is a plate that split off of the Pacific Plate. It dove underneath North America, and it ended up sort of wedged in a way under what's now Colorado. And that caused melting and uplift and some imbalances in the mantle that may have led to the uplift here. But that's still kind of debated. What we do know is that one of the results of the Laramide orogeny was the creation of something called the Colorado Mineral Belt. And this is a belt that's about 500 kilometers long, it's about 25 to 50 kilometers wide, and it's really where most of our metallic ore deposits here in Colorado are concentrated. And this is dominated by Laramide age igneous rocks, so rocks that are the same age approximately as the uplift and the mountain building. So here's a generalized geologic map of Colorado. You can see in kind of a pinkish here in the central part of the state. These are Paleozoic sedimentary rocks and also some Precambrian igneous rocks that dominate the Front Range Mountains. Here at east, we're basically in that Great Plains physiographic province on the right. And then down here in red, these are all tertiary and younger igneous rocks related to the San Juan volcanics. A lot of eruptive volcanic rocks down here. And then you can see between these mountain regions, we have some valleys. Those are dominated typically by either younger alluvial material or by some of the basement rocks that are exposed locally here. Also, you have the Colorado Plateau out here. That's one thing I didn't mention, which is sandstone, and that's an extension of what's going down here into New Mexico and Utah and Arizona. So a little bit more about the Colorado Mineral Belt. The Colorado Mineral Belt starts down here, kind of near Cortez and Durango in the lower left hand of this illustration, and extends all the way up here to Boulder and just north of Denver. So basically, you can see the names of all the classic mining districts here: Ouray, Aspen, Leadville, Breckenridge, Gilman, Alma. A lot of the places I'm going to talk about are concentrated in this belt. Looking here on the left, basically this figure is showing the northeast, southwest orientation of the Colorado Mineral Belt relative to different age volcanic events. And there's some thinking now that all this more modern volcanic activity, which extends down to what we call the Rio Grande Rift, may have had some bearing on the Colorado Mineral Belt and why the Colorado Mineral Belt concentrated along that kind of lineament here. So a little bit more about the Colorado Mineral Belt, and then we'll get into some pretty rock photos and talking about minerals. So like I said, the Colorado Mineral Belt is about 500 kilometers long, 25 to 50 kilometers wide, and it's a zone of intense mineralization that's dominated by rocks that are anywhere from about 40 to 75 million years old. And you can see on the right here, this is a little bit of a better map. This is showing the central part of the Colorado Mineral Belt, and you can see pretty much all our famous mining towns and mining localities are in this belt here. Telluride, Red Mountain, Rico, Silverton, Creed, Aspen, Leadville, Gilman, they all kind of occur in this window here. And you know, these are the localities that have really sustained the Colorado mining industry and really led to the development and the settling of Colorado initially back in the early 19th century and mid-19th century. This belt has produced over 45 million ounces of gold, 500 million ounces of silver, and hundreds of millions of pounds of lead and zinc and molybdenum and other metals like copper and uranium as well. Most of these districts now are dormant as far as mining goes, but there is actually still some mining activity going on, and there's some new mining for mineral specimens happening, which is a kind of unusual concept that I'll talk about a little more. So a little bit of Colorado mining history. Colorado mining history actually starts in a way back in the late 18th century, believe it or not. Most people think of the gold rush in Colorado starting in the 1860s, but all the way back in 1758, a gentleman named Antoine Simon Lepage Duprat, which is quite the long name, I think he's French explorer, had a map that depicted a source of gold that was north of the Arkansas River near a tributary running from a mountain. And he described this as a rivulet whose waters rolled down gold dust, which sounds very romantic. I'm sure it was exaggerated, like most of the early descriptions. But so this was back in the Spanish exploration period. There was already kind of anecdotal knowledge of gold in Colorado. And in fact, in 1807, Zebulon Pike recorded in his journal that a gentleman named James Persson had showed him some gold nuggets in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he said that these nuggets came from what's now the kind of South Park area in Colorado. Moving forward, 1850 to 1860, prospectors like Lewis Ralston basically were on their way out to California for the California Gold Rush, and they stopped in what's now Denver and more specifically Cherry Creek and the South Platte River, and they actually panned small amounts of gold. However, they actually continued on to California's gold country as part of the kind of 49er gold rush in California. Finally, in 1859, a gentleman named John Gregory discovered the first lode vein, so the first hard rock gold deposit at what's called the Gregory Diggings, which is up in Central City on Clear Creek. And this is really the beginning of Colorado's gold rush and the settlement of Colorado. Moving forward, 1860 to 1870, most major mining districts in the Front Range were discovered during this period. 1879 to 1880, there were major silver discoveries in Aspen and Leadville, and this was the beginning of Colorado's silver boom, you could say. 1890 was the discovery of Cripple Creek, which was the last major gold district to be discovered in Colorado, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then 1880 to 1890, there were major discoveries in the San Juan Mountains and the establishment of Ouray, Telluride, and Silverton in these towns down there. And more recently, from about 1940 to 1960, there was a uranium boom out in western Colorado that was related to the atomic energy boom. And this is outside the Colorado mineral belt, so I'm not going to talk too much about this. But a little bit more Colorado mining history. 1913, 1914, something that's now known as the Colorado Coalfield War. It's also better known as the Ludlow Massacre, where about 12,000 coal miners were on strike in Ludlow, which is in southern Colorado. Some of these workers were actually killed by agents of the company, and there was clash between police and labor. And this really marked a big change between the labor relation structure between miners and unions. And it was a big blow to organized labor, and it's an important event in Colorado history, and it's also an important event in the mining history of Colorado. World War I to World War II period really saw a kind of peak in Colorado in terms of metal production and number of mines operating. However, many of the older districts were already in decline. Some of the older districts like Boulder County and Gilpin and Clear Creek counties, Aspen, Leadville, these were already seeing a decline in mining at this time. 1940 up until the 70s saw the closure of many small underground mines, as well as the consolidation of mining properties into larger corporate interests. So large open pit or underground mines like Henderson and Climax and Summitville, these mines were expanded during this time. 85 up to about 2000 saw the closure of some of the last underground mines here in Colorado in historic mining districts. So mines such as the Black Cloud mine up in Leadville, or the Sunnyside and the Idorado mine down in the San Juan Triangle, or the Bulldog mine in Creed. These mines closed during this period. However, from about 1989 up until the present, something interesting that's been going on here, which is kind of spearheaded by my company, by Collector's Edge, is the small-scale mining of mineral specimens specifically. So operations like the Sweet Home mine and also the Smoky Hawk mine, which Joe Doris is operating for Amazonite specimens. This is kind of a new chapter, you could say, in Colorado mining, and it's an interesting spin on the traditional mining idea. And then 2000 up until the present, kind of the most recent chapter. There's still kind of an uncertain outlook in terms of Colorado's metal mining industry, but there's more exploration in these so-called brownfield districts, areas that have already been mined, like Creed and Silverton, and there's also been some reopening of some of the larger operations like the Climax mine. So we're going to start off talking up in the very far northeast corner of the Colorado Mineral Belt about what's called the Boulder County Telluride Belt, and also the Tungsten District. So looking on this map on the right here, you can see Denver is in the lower right, and then you have up here, essentially in gray, is the outline of the Front Range of the mountains. And up here in this little square box, this is approximately the outline of the Boulder County District. So the Boulder County District is fairly small. The Telluride Belt is a classic example of a gold telluride occurrence. It's only about 5 square miles in size, the main district. That very high-grade gold telluride deposits. Mining started quite early, 1880 up to about 1940. Most of the mines were already closed. And these were very narrow, irregular veins. They could be very high-grade, or they could be almost barren within distances of 5-10 feet. So a lot of this ore was basically hand-cobbed, which is why you don't see many specimens from these localities today. The Tungsten District is also in the same area, closer to the town of Nederland and Ward up here. And the Tungsten District is a narrow belt, about 9.5 miles long. And ferberite was recognized there, which is a tungsten mineral, in 1899. And this caused a small tungsten boom that peaked around World War I and lasted up to World War II. And this was mainly driven by demand for tungsten for the war effort for special steel alloys. So here are some specimens from the Boulder County Telluride District. And just a heads up in my captions here in my photos, if you see this BKL, that's Brian K. Lees, my boss. He was nice enough to let me use some great specimen photos from his collection. And a lot of you know he probably has one of the best Colorado collections. Shouldn't say probably, he does have one of the best Colorado collections out there, and was nice enough to let me use some photos from his collection. So you'll see some nice specimens from Brian's collection and also from other people's collections, Dave Bunk and Benji Cooling and other prominent Colorado collectors. So up here in the upper left, we have a very nice slab specimen from the Cache mine, and you can see this has quite a bit of native gold in it. And it's also got some gray stuff around it, which is dominantly petsite and hessite and probably some sylvanite too. These are gold telluride minerals. And this is very typical of these veins. This specimen is only about 1 inch wide. That a lot of these veins were incredibly rich and were just loaded with native gold and with telluride minerals. Below that, in the lower left, we have a specimen that's actually showing native tellurium crystals, which is something quite rare and something that some of the Boulder County mines have produced nice examples of. These are kind of bladed crystals of native tellurium. On the right, we have a very rich specimen, also from the Cache mine, and you can see that's loaded with native gold, and it's got quite a bit of the telluride minerals with it as well. So some of these ore samples could be really spectacular as far as richness goes. This is a fantastic specimen. This is probably the best specimen I know of personally from the Gold Hill District. This is in Brian's collection. This came from Dave Roeder, I believe. This is a crystallized gold specimen. It's about 6.5 centimeters across, and it's from the Slide mine, which is a small underground mine in the Boulder County District. But just incredible specimen, beautiful crystallization, very delicate kind of herringbone style gold crystals. A couple more photos of specimens from the Tungsten District. So this is very typical, this upper left here. These are small ferberite crystals, which is iron tungstate mineral, and they're in a quartz monzonite kind of host rock here. These crystals are probably only up to about 1/4 inch, 1/3 of an inch is typical. On the right, we have a specimen from the Phillips mine from Brian's collection with slightly larger ferberite crystals. These are up to maybe 1.5 centimeters. Those are pretty big for the district. That's a nice example. On the lower left is an example of tungstite, which is the yellow stuff, and that's actually pseudomorphing ferberite, which is kind of interesting. And the lower right here, you can see an ore sample, and this is very typical of the tungsten ores. You have this brecciation. The wall rock is brecciated, and then the matrix here, this black, is actually all ferberite that's cementing together those fragments. So we'll move on to the Gilpin County districts. So we'll talk about Central City and also Black Hawk. So this is just kind of southwest a little bit of the Boulder County district. If you look in this map in the lower right here, you can see down here Central City and Idaho Springs. This is quite close to Denver. These are the closest mining districts really to Denver. And they were also the site of the first real major hard rock mining activity in Colorado from 1859 up to the 1880s. Mainly producing gold, also lesser lead, zinc, copper, and silver, but dominantly gold district. And these are high-grade, what we call epithermal veins that are hosted typically in high-angle faults. These are cutting Precambrian rocks like the Idaho Springs Formation, and they're related to Eocene and younger intrusive rocks. So these black rocks here, these black blobs in this map, these are young intrusive rocks, igneous rocks, and these are related to the mineralization there. The peak of mining activity in Central City and Black Hawk was from around 1880 to 1900, and the mining was largely stopped by the World War II period. Today, some of you might know Gilpin County and Black Hawk especially as more of a gambling destination than anything. They legalized casinos there some years ago, and it's a big tourist destination. There's lots of casinos, and that's driven by its proximity to Denver. It's only about an hour away from Denver. So here's some specimens from the Gilpin County districts. On the upper left here, we have a nice enargite specimen with quartz. This is from Central City, probably from the Powers mine. This is very typical, these large enargite crystals that are partially coated in quartz. It's kind of a nice association. The lower left is a nice kind of finely crystallized gold specimen, actually from the Gregory vein, which is fairly rare. This was the first vein that was discovered in the Black Hawk district along Clear Creek, and there's not many known specimens from this locality, but a nice gold specimen. It's about 3 centimeters. Lower right, we have a sphalerite here from the Blackjack mine, which I believe is in the Central City district, and very typical of these kind of black sphalerite crystals. So we're going to move on here to talk about Clear Creek County. just to the south of Gilpin County, and that includes the Idaho Springs District, Georgetown, and also the Silver Plume District. So most of you are probably familiar with where that is. It's essentially the I-70 corridor. So Denver would be to the right of this lower right illustration. And you can see Idaho Springs, Georgetown, Empire, and Silver Plume, and they're conveniently accessed by I-70 here. This district also was one of the earlier districts to be developed in Colorado. Hard rock mining activity started back essentially in 1859 and continued development up until the 1880s. And this was driven also by easy access from Denver up the Cripple Creek Valley. Mainly these deposits were producing gold, but also lesser lead, zinc, copper, and silver, similar to the deposits up in Gilpin County. And in terms of their geology, they're fairly similar as well. These are high-grade epithermal veins, and they're hosted in the same kind of high-angle faults, cutting Precambrian rocks that we see up in Gilpin County. Again, mining activity peaked pretty early, from about 1880 to 1900, and mining was largely kind of stopped by the World War II period. And there are a couple mines in Clear Creek County that are really known for specimens. The Dixie mine is probably the most famous, known for crystallized gold specimens. So there's a couple standout localities in Clear Creek County for specimens. So here are some great gold specimens from the Dixie mine. Dixie mine is located in Idaho Springs, and it's a high-grade gold deposit that it's most famous for these beautiful crystallized gold specimens. On the left, you can see a nice specimen from Brian's collection showing a kind of leafy group of flattened gold crystals and plates. This is very typical for the Dixie mine. That's about 4.5 centimeters. Upper right, you can see again those kind of flattened plates. A lot of these are made up actually of small spinel twin crystals. And some of these, when you find them, are completely embedded in sphalerite and pyrite, and the gold is actually in the sulfides. So it can take some work to kind of prep these like this. But when you do prep them, they often have really nice crystals. This is a specimen from Dave Bunk Minerals down here that's showing some nicely formed crystals. Some black uglies as well, and other things that come from Clear Creek County. The specimen on the left is actually quite impressive for the district, and actually for Colorado in general. This is a big acanthite crystal group. This is about 7 centimeters tall, and this is from an obscure mine called the Bismarck Pelican Mine, which is up in Georgetown. So, that's something that would hold its own with Mexico, and makes you wonder how many of those were probably crushed or smelted or something back in the day. But a few of them did survive. This is a nice one from Brian's collection. The upper photo here, we have a nice plate of galena and sphalerite crystals on quartz from the Dunderberg mine in Silver Plume, and that's a very typical sulfide assemblage for that district. Lower right, we have a nice specimen with some small red proustite crystals. Actually, some of the silver minerals, the ruby silver minerals, also occurred in these districts. And this specimen is from the Smuggler mine, and it's got some nice red proustite crystals there, up to maybe 5 millimeters or a centimeter at the most. It's a good question. So there's another Smuggler mine in Aspen, which I'll talk about. There's a couple Smuggler mines in Colorado. So moving over to Summit County, we'll talk about the Breckenridge District. Breckenridge is now famous as a ski town, but it was originally founded in the 1860s based on rich placer deposits that were discovered along the Swan River and the Blue River south of Breckenridge. So there was some sluice placer activity and also some hydraulic mining that went on starting back in the 1860s. 1879, the town of Breckenridge was founded, and hard rock gold deposits were discovered on Farncombe Hill. From around 1880 to 1910, a gentleman named John Campione, who was a mining financier and businessman, assembled a really world-class collection of Colorado crystallized gold specimens, mainly from the Breckenridge District. And he's up here in the upper right. And it's really because of his foresight and his collecting passion for these gold specimens that a lot of the great specimens we have from Breckenridge are preserved today, because the vast majority of them were melted down or were otherwise destroyed. And he was smart enough and astute enough to preserve some of these specimens. 1898 saw the first large floating gold dredge brought up to Breckenridge, and at the same time there was a decline of underground mining and an increase in this use of mechanized dredges. And if you go to Breckenridge today, you'll see huge gravel piles along the side of the highway and along the Swan River. And those are essentially left over from large-scale mechanized dredge mining for gold during that period. However, by World War II, the town population had declined to less than 250, and pretty much all the mines were closed. So Breckenridge was almost gone by World War II. And then move forward to 1961, the first ski lift opens, and that was the beginning of the modern ski resort era of Breckenridge. And I thought this was kind of a neat historical photo here showing the town and showing that's all now the ski resort up there, kind of below the alpine area. So this is probably the most famous gold specimen from Breckenridge. This piece is nicknamed Tom's Baby. It's a huge gold specimen. It's about 13.5 pounds, and it was discovered on July 23rd, 1887 by a couple prospectors in Breckenridge. It's on display at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Just an outstanding specimen. And what I like about it is that it's a good geological specimen too, because it actually shows how these gold deposits form. So this is not just a lump, it's actually made up of many interlocking sheets and crystalline plates of gold. And this specimen is not very thick. It's only about maybe 2 or 3 centimeters thick, but it's almost solid gold, and that was the entire width of the vein. This little vein was almost completely full of native gold, and the native gold had precipitated in this vein along with things like calcite and quartz and iron oxides. And when those minerals dissolve away, then you get this kind of interesting surface here on the gold. And this is a photo of the safe at the Denver Museum that holds Campion's gold collection. And if you have not been to the Denver Museum and seen this, I highly, highly recommend it. It's truly one of the world's best crystallized gold collections. And it's great that it was kept together like this. Here's a couple specimens from the Campion collection again. And you can see this very characteristic occurrence of these angular plates. These plates are made up of hundreds of flattened parallel growth crystals, basically spinel twin crystals. But these are forming these plates between, edges of calcite crystals or iron oxides or something that then dissolves away, and you end up with these amazing gold specimens like this. And these are both fairly large. I think this left one is about 15 centimeters. And same thing with the right piece. A couple nice specimens from Brian Lee's collection. Also from Farncombe Hill, you can see again this characteristic flattened plates here. This is about 5-6 centimeters, I believe. On the right, we have a nice specimen showing some elongated crystals, which was also typical of some of the Breckenridge mines, these kind of elongated spinel twin gold crystals. Just really outstanding crystallized gold specimens from this district. Breckenridge was also known for this so-called bird's nest gold, which is essentially tightly knit wire gold that occurs in this kind of bird's nest form. And you can see a couple of really nice examples here of these really delicate gold wires that are intergrown in this beautiful form, really aesthetic and really classic for Breckenridge, this kind of gold crystallization. So we're going to move a little bit to the west now over to Lake County and talk about the Leadville district. So Leadville was discovered initially back in 1859. Placer gold was discovered in California Gulch. And then a small mining settlement called Oro City was founded along California Gulch, about a mile from where present Leadville is in 1860. However, it wasn't up until 1877 that the town of Leadville was actually established by a gentleman named Horace Tabor and another gentleman, August Meyer. And these are well-known names to a lot of Coloradans because they were prominent businessmen. They were also philanthropists and supported a lot of organizations. So that was the beginning of Leadville. By 1880, Leadville was one of the richest and wealthiest mining camps in the world. Its population was over 15,000, and it produced $15 million a year, and this is in 1880 dollars, in silver dominantly with gold, copper, lead, and zinc as well. And I thought this was kind of a neat photo here showing the town of Leadville about 1880 with Mount Massive in the background. That's looking to the west there. 1883, Senator Horace Tabor, by now he was a senator and also very wealthy, divorced his wife and marries Baby Doe McCourt, who was a kind of celebrity starlet of the time, I guess you could say. And this caused a big scandal. And this is a famous Colorado story that Baby Doe eventually dies penniless in a wooden cabin in Leadville in 1935. And it was a kind of rags to riches, back to rags story. And this is one of the Colorado historical stories that people love to tell, that this really centered around Leadville and around the development of Leadville. 1893, the Sherman Silver Purchase Act was repealed, and this really hurt Leadville's economy because it basically tanked the price of silver overnight. So the district shifted to other metals at this time to keep going, but in a way it never really recovered, at least the silver production from that. 1940 up until today saw the closure of many of the underground mines in the Leadville district, and that culminated in 1999 with the closure of the Black Cloud mine.
What did this Sherman Silver Purchase Act do?
The Sherman Silver Purchase Act, I believe, essentially deregulated. The silver market was pegged by the government. It was fixed at a rate, I believe. And anybody in the audience who knows more is welcome to correct me on this because I'm not sure about this. But I believe it essentially deregulated the silver price. And there wasn't this artificial control of the silver price. And the government also was not purchasing silver. So the government was purchasing silver for monetary policy, and they decided not to do that. And that changed the silver market quite a bit. So Leadville has also produced some outstanding gold specimens. Most of these are from a mine called the Little Johnny Mine, which is up on Breese Hill. This upper left example is about 3 centimeters and really nice quality crystals, nice kind of branching dendritic crystals. This kind of spongy gold here is very typical for the Little Johnny Mine as well. In fact, the Little Johnny Mine is interesting because it's one of the few localities in Colorado where people were finding good quality gold specimens with metal detector up until pretty recently, because a lot of the gold was really mixed in with these ugly iron oxides, and it was actually put onto the dump, believe it or not. It was not recovered historically. A lot of really nice coarse gold. You just would not recognize it as gold. It's coated in crud, and people have been finding nice specimens like this with metal detectors up there for some time. Other specimens and minerals from the Leadville district. In the upper left, we have a nice rusite specimen. This kind of This one? Yeah, I think that is actually. Sorry for my lack of photo credits on some of these, but yeah, that I believe you're right is an American Museum specimen. And again, very typical crystallization, kind of fine-grained, inter-grown crystals. That's very typical for Leadville district. On the upper left here, we have jackstraw cerussite, which is very common. A lot of the older Leadville deposits have this kind of radiating cerussite crystals. Also some fairly nice rhodochrosite from the Leadville district. This middle specimen here is from the John Reed mine, which is actually up closer to Fremont Pass, and that was known for nice rhodochrosite specimens for a number of years. Lower left is a nice pyrite cube. These pyrite cubes with these striations could get quite large from Leadville, up to 8-10 inches, sometimes even a foot on edge. I've heard of pyrite from Leadville. Nice black sphalerite crystals from the Black Cloud mine. Again, lots of pyrite, nice quality pyridahedral pyrite crystals. And another nice rhodochrosite here. I believe that's from the Climax mine, Climax open pit. There were also some nice rhodochrosite specimens from a mine called the Julia Fisk mine. And most of them were collected and marketed by a gentleman named Bill Hayward, who was a well-known collector here in the Denver area. He actually was able to collect these in the late 50s. The mine was reopened during the Korean War. And these are a little different. You can see they're these kind of baby pink, actually discoidal crystals. They're not rhombohedra. And they often occur with some nice galena crystals as well, nice twin galena crystals and sphalerite. So these are from the Julia Fisk mine. Another nice gold specimen. This is from the Ibex mine. This is from the Dave Maytack collection, and it's a collector's edge piece. That really nice quality gold crystals. I believe that specimen's about 3 or 4 centimeters across. And one more rhodochrosite. This is a nice one from Brian Lee's collection. You can see these nice cherry red rhodochrosite crystals, actually quite similar to some of what the Sweet Home mine produces, with some malachite, which is a kind of nice color contrast here. This is tetrahedrite that's starting to alter a little bit to malachite. And that was typical of some of the early rhodochrosites that were found at the John Reed mine. A couple more nice specimens from the Climax mine. This is a nice rhodochrosite here with quartz from the Climax open pit, which is now reopened. I was actually at the Buena Vista show, which is one of our summer outdoor shows here last year. It's kind of a quick digression. And a gentleman was wandering around the show and he had 5-gallon buckets and was showing them to people. And normally when people do this, it's tumbled petrified wood or some massive fluorite they found in their backyard. This guy was a haul truck driver at Climax and had buckets full of chunks of beautiful red rhodochrosite. And he was wondering if the stuff was worth money and if anybody was interested. These were obviously the remains of probably incredible crystals that had been found just a couple days before and just crushed. So I cringe when I think of some of the nice things that are probably being found at the Climax mine right now and are not being recovered or saved in any way. It's kind of sad, but that's how mining goes these days. So
You can always try to see what you can make zinc.
yeah, it's something that we could potentially do as far as specimen recovery. My company, we do partnerships with mining companies sometimes. However, this mine is a big open pit mine. It's very mechanized. It's very focused on production. So I don't know about the logistics of doing something like that, but it's certainly an interesting question if you could work with a mining company and recover some of these things, because I'm sure they're being found. And the Sweet Home mine, which I'll talk about in a minute, is related in a way to the Climax porphyry. They're part of the same system and they're geologically related. So moving on up to Eagle County, we're going to go north a little bit now and talk about the Gilman District. So Gilman is situated in the Eagle River Canyon between the towns of Minturn and Redcliffe. So this is north of Leadville. It's dominated by lead zinc deposits, and these are hosted in the Mississippian-age Leadville limestone. And there's a lot of carbonate replacement going on. And that results in what we call manto deposits, which are kind of flat-lying carbonate replacement deposits, and a lot of paleokarst as well. There were, however, some small high-grade gold mines in the Saguache quartzite, and these were mined typically pretty early on, early 1900s. The Groundhog mine is the most famous among those, and it's known for superb wire gold specimens that were found about 100 years ago. The Eagle mine is the major mine in the Gilman District. Eagle mine operated from about 1920 up to 1982, and it was one of Colorado's most prolific underground mines as far as specimen production. Pyrite alone, there were thousands upon thousands of good pyrite specimens that came out of the Eagle mine. And it used to be that in Colorado, probably in the 70s, Gilman pyrite was cheaper and more abundant than Peruvian pyrite, which is kind of hard to imagine, but they would find huge pyrite pockets. And if you go over to the Denver Museum, you can actually see a recreation of a pyrite crystal pocket from the Eagle mine, which is kind of cool. And it gives you an idea of some of these pyrite pockets that they would find. Now, unfortunately, it's largely a Superfund site. There's been some talk about redeveloping it into a private ski resort because it's quite close to where Vail is now. That at the moment, it's essentially a ghost town. And you can see here the town of Gilman, which is now all abandoned, is sitting right on the edge of this big canyon here. And the mines are actually down at the bottom of the canyon. Most of the adits and the mine tunnels are down at the river level down here. So this is what I consider kind of like the holy trinity of Colorado minerals, these three specimens. The one in the middle is my favorite mineral specimen personally. This is just an obscenely good rock. And what makes these even more fascinating is that there are very few of them known. So these are wire gold specimens from the Groundhog mine in Gilman. And I know of 3 of this size and quality in existence. And I think there's probably less than 10 of these in the world. The middle one is from the Harvard Museum. And it's big. It's about 10, 11 centimeters. And just outstanding specimen. It's aesthetic. It's rare. It's got everything you would want in a specimen. Just an iconic piece. On the left is its smaller brother. This is in the LA County Museum. I think this is about 5 centimeters. And on the right, excuse me, is our local specimen. This is at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And what's neat about this one is it's actually still embedded in the matrix. And this wire, if you were to completely stretch it out, would be about 10 centimeters, I think, or 15 centimeters. It's actually pretty big. So these are just incredible specimens. It's very little is known about how they were found, exactly when they were found, but they're from the Groundhog mine, and they're some of the iconic specimens for Colorado. There's a nice little one here. This is in Brian's collection now. This is ex-Dave Roeder collection, and it's got a little bit of sphalerite on it, which is interesting. In the middle here is a beautiful pyrite specimen from the Groundhog mine. This is actually on the show poster this year for the Fine Mineral Show here, so I thought it was appropriate to show this specimen. But it's a really Sure. I was glad to see that when you put that on the poster. Yeah, it's just a really aesthetic specimen, and it's got this preferential overgrowth here of fine-grained pyrite that makes for a really aesthetic combination. On the right is a very nice rhodochrosite specimen on sphalerite. This is from the Eagle Mine. And again, you can see these kind of bladed disc-like rhodochrosite crystals. This is very typical for the Eagle Mine instead of the kind of red ROMs that most people think of. Some more specimens from the Eagle Mine. These nice dolomite crystals here on the upper left is kind of pearly dolomite. This is very typical for the Eagle Mine. On the upper right, these are actually pyrite pseudomorphs after pyrrhotite. It's a little hard to see in this photo, but these are bladed pyrrhotite crystals that have been replaced by pyrite. This is also a very common pseudomorph from the Eagle Mine. It's kind of interesting. On the lower left is about a 3-centimeter specimen of polybasite crystals. So this is one of the few localities in Colorado where you get nice crystallized silver sulfur salts and some of the rare silver species. So this is a really unusual specimen here, polybasite crystals. In the lower center, these are actually digenite crystals. So some of the rare copper minerals that you get in Butte, Montana, and other places actually occur at the Eagle Mine as well. These are small digenite crystals. And then these golden barite crystals are also quite famous from the Eagle Mine. These are really classic, these small gemmy golden barites. So we're going to move on over to Park County over the Mosquito Range and talk a little bit about the Alma and the Fairplay District. So rich placer gold deposits have been known in this area since at least the late 1860s and possibly earlier. I told the story a little earlier on about how the Spanish explorers had reported gold in what is now the upper South Park Valley. That's probably the area of what's now Alma and Fairplay. Later, there was development of limited hard rock mining in Buckskin Gulch, which is where the Sweet Home Mine is, and Pennsylvania Mountain, which is near Alma. Most of these mines were small. They were targeting polymetallic veins that had gold, silver, lead, zinc. Some of the larger ones, however, had a more longer lifespan, such as the London mine operated for a number of years. But most of these mines were small, and this photo on the right here is actually a vintage photo that I really like of the Sweet Home Mine, back when it was actually an ore mine and not a rhodochrosite mine. And it gives you a sense of scale here of, this is basically a couple guys and an ore cart and a shovel, and that was the type of mining they were doing. Similar to Breckenridge, after the underground mines kind of faded out, there were some of these large-scale dredges, like you can see in the lower right here, that came in. And these basically sat in the river, and they just churned up gravel, and they recovered gold by gravity methods from the river gravels. And this was the kind of more recent period. And it's possible, actually, that gold recovery continues today in Alma, and especially down towards Fairplay, at a number of these gravel operations. Now, these are all permitted as gravel operations, which is convenient because it's a lot more expensive and difficult to permit a metal mine than it is a gravel pit. But somehow all these gravel operations seem to have rotary trommels, which last I checked, you didn't really need for gravel. So I'm pretty sure they're getting some gold as well. So it's kind of interesting. The most famous thing, obviously, about the Alma and Fairplay area to mineral collectors is the Sweet Home Mine. And the Sweet Home Mine has been famous for world-class rhodochrosite for a long time, going back to at least the 1920s. However, it was reopened by Brian Lees and Collector's Edge back in 1992. And you all know probably the story of that, and that was a big success. That closed in 2004, and we started a new project on the Sweet Home vein system about 2 years ago called the Detroit City Mine. And that's an ongoing project right now. Yep, Collector's Edge. So we own and operate the new project there. And this is from the 1990s, from when Brian went in the first time to the Sweet Home Mine. And I love this photo on the left here. This is the first high-quality rhodochrosite crystal that was found at the Sweet Home Mine. They sunk a lot of money and time into this project, and I believe this was really the first good crystal that came out. And just a beautiful crystal. You can see in the middle here, typical vein. These are quite narrow veins with crystals growing on both walls. So extracting these can be a real challenge, getting them out without damaging them. On the right is a specimen known as the Alma Queen. This was actually one of the earlier specimens. This was found back in the 60s, and went through a series of famous collections, Peter Bancroft and Dave Wilbur and other people. And I believe it's at the Houston Museum currently down in Texas. Of course, everybody knows the Alma King. I love this photo here with Brian smiling right after having removed the crystal from the pocket. Just an incredible specimen. You know, this is a 15 centimeter, 18 centimeter on edge rhodochrosite crystal. And it was nicely reattached to its matrix here. And now you can see it over at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science on display. And it's become a really famous specimen. It's something that even my non-rock people, when I tell them, oh, I work in mineral specimens in the crystal business, they say, oh yeah, the Alma King, I know that. So it's helped popularize mineral collecting here in Colorado. Two more kind of famous rhodochrosite specimens. From the Sweet Home Mine, the one on the left is known as the Alma Rose. It's kind of the sister or brother, if you will, of the Alma King. And it's a really fantastic specimen, big crystals, really stunning. It was in Tucson a couple years ago on display, and now you can see it up at the Rice Museum in Portland, Oregon. Specimen on the right is known as the Ribbon. It's another really famous rhodochrosite specimen. It's about 30 centimeters, just big crystals, really stunning, beautiful aesthetics on that. So I'll talk really quick about the new chapter at the Sweet Home Mine, which is our Detroit City project. So this started in spring of 2016, so about a year and a half ago. We started driving a new horizontal adit about 200 vertical feet above the old Sweet Home Mine portal, which is now basically sealed off and reclaimed. So this is not the Sweet Home Mine. It's on the Sweet Home vein system, but it's actually a whole new operation. And it's named after the old claim block that included the Sweet Home Mine, which is called the Detroit City Claim. The adit is going to intersect basically the upward extension of this steeply dipping Sweet Home vein system. And we're going to follow this vein via crosscuts and raises and stopes. And you can see here is a photo of what the portal looks like. You can see our LHD there. That's a load haul dump. It's a piece of mining equipment where we scoop out rock and bring in supplies and stuff. And we're right up here at tree line. This is about 11,500 feet. And you can see down here the Sweet Home Mine adits by the road. And we're just up the hill here a couple hundred feet. And we're starting to see some good signs. We haven't hit any rhodochrosite crystals really yet, but we're starting to see some signs that suggest that we may be close to finding some pockets and maybe finding some rhodo. So it's an exciting time up there, and you may see some specimens in Tucson. Fingers crossed. And I'll talk real quick before we move on to the next district about Colorado's largest gold nugget. So this is also on display over at the Denver Museum. And this is about a 12-ounce nugget, and it was found in 1937, I believe, is what that says. And this is from Pennsylvania Mountain, so this is kind of across the valley from the Sweet Home Mine. It's a mountain in a district that's known for these large nuggets, and people continue to find nuggets here and there today using metal detectors. So moving on down to Teller County, we're going to go to the Cripple Creek district. And Cripple Creek is kind of special because it was Colorado's last major gold district to be discovered. It was not really discovered until October of 1890 when a cowboy and prospector named Bob Womack made a discovery of outcropping gold mineralization. The population had grew to over 10,000 by 1893 with many gold mines open. Geologically, it's unusual because it's actually off the axis of the Colorado Mineral Belt. So if you look at the Colorado Mineral Belt, the closest kind of mines and districts of the Colorado Mineral Belt are about 50, 60 kilometers away from Cripple Creek. So it's been a big mystery why Cripple Creek is sort of off the axis. And in fact, some people have used that to sort of question the idea of the Colorado Mineral Belt and what that is exactly. So Cripple Creek is a little bit unusual. It's a volcanic-hosted gold deposit, and more specifically, it's a gold Telluride deposit. So one of the reasons the district wasn't discovered earlier is because there's relatively little native gold. Most of the gold is in these gold Telluride minerals. Like many of the mining towns, it sprung up very ramshackle and haphazard, and a major fire in 1896 destroyed much of the town. However, it was rebuilt, and by the World War I to World War II period, there were dozens of mines open, and these included some quite deep mines, shafts up to 5,000, 6,000 feet even, mining some of these high-grade gold Telluride deposits. District produced probably today over 30 million ounces. By 2005, the figure I found was 23.5 million ounces, so this is a huge gold district, a really important economically gold district. And the current mine that's in Cripple Creek, the so-called Persson mine, is actually the last large operating gold mine in Colorado, and that's owned by Newmont Mining Corporation right now. So some specimens from Cripple Creek. Calaverite is probably the mineral that people first think of from Cripple Creek. These are some great calaverite specimens. The specimen on the left is from the Smithsonian, I believe. And big platy crystals of calaverite up to like 2-3 centimeters. A really spectacular piece. On the upper right, you can see some of these bladed calaverite crystals with some kind of yellow chalcedony. That's very typical. Calaverite is a gold telluride. It's AuTe2. So it's one of the main ore minerals, and also one of the few minerals that actually has gold in the formula. The lower right is a nice example of calaverite blades. I believe this is from Rock Courier's collection, and just really nice, sharp calaverite blades. And some of these are actually starting to alter to native gold. Here are some specimens of sylvanite, which is another important telluride mineral from Cripple Creek. The upper left, you can see these beautiful kind of reticulated sylvanite crystals. This is very typical for this mineral. And again, below that, you can see elongated blades kind of growing on a fracture surface in phonolite host rock. This is very typical for sylvanite from Cripple Creek. On the right is a specimen that's actually native gold pseudomorph after sylvanite and calaverite. And more of the gold, the free gold that occurs in the Cripple Creek district, is actually these pseudomorphs where the telluride minerals have been replaced by native gold. And you can see that in the upper right here. You can see some nice sylvanite crystals that have been replaced by native gold. Some more aesthetic things from the Cripple Creek district include this very nice fluorite specimen here. This is from the Persson mine. These are really treasured by Colorado collectors, these yellow fluorites. There's very few of them that are out there. This one's from Brian Lee's collection, and it's about 15 centimeters. Some very nice amethyst as well. This is from the Smithsonian in the middle. This is about a 10 centimeter amethyst crystal with nice color and this kind of parallel growth form. And on the right is a very nice specimen of creedite from Dave Bunk's collection. This is about 4 centimeters. And these are actually little sprays of purple creedite. And this was a small find that was made in the Crescent Pit, I think about 15, 18 years ago, of these beautiful creedite crystals. So we're going to move over to Aspen now in Pitkin County. I think when most of the general public thinks of Aspen, they think of this year, what celebrities are wearing and what the latest celebrity spotting is in Aspen. But actually, way before Aspen was a haven for celebrities and bad ski movies, it was a mining town, and it was founded on very rich silver discoveries that were made starting back around 1880. So going as far back as 1879, the Hayden survey suggested that there were possible rich silver ores in the Aspen area. And in 1880, two gentlemen named B. Clark Wheeler and Charles Hallam surveyed the town site and named it Aspen, and they formed their own town mining company. 1891, 1892, fast forward about 11 years, Aspen actually surpassed Leadville as the most productive silver district in the U.S. At this point, there were dozens of mines operating, and it was a really busy western mining town. This lower right photo kind of gives you an idea of what it would have been like back then. Lots of people arriving on horseback, and prospectors getting outfitted with supplies, and miners getting ready to hopefully strike it rich. However, in 1893, similar to Leadville, the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act really hurt Aspen silver production. And by 1930, there were only a couple mines that were still operating, like the Smuggler and the Molly Gibson. And the population had dwindled all the way down to like 700-800 people in Aspen. Move forward to 1946, and that saw the founding of the Aspen Ski Company. And that was really one of the first ski companies and ski resorts in the whole U.S. And by even the mid-60s and 70s, Aspen was the premier ski resort destination in the U.S., and now it's become an enclave for celebrities and super wealthy people. But it was founded on silver. So here are two really fantastic silver specimens from Aspen, both from Brian Lee's collection. And on the left here, we have a beautiful group of wires, really stout wires with some acanthite. I think this is about 5 centimeters. On the right, we have a really nice miniature-size crystallized silver specimen from Aspen. These are quite rare, but they were found in the early days at Aspen, these beautiful crystallized silvers, almost like something from Mexico. A couple more fantastic crystallized silvers. These are both from Sharon and Gene Cisneros' collection out in California. This left piece is incredible. This is one of my favorite Colorado specimens. It's a crystallized silver. It would compete with anything from Batopias or from South America, but it's just an incredible specimen for Colorado. Beautiful herringbone silver crystals, and this is almost certainly from the early days of mining there. Same thing with this nice specimen on the right. Another nice silver specimen. This one has been etched from calcite. You can see there are some really nice kind of herringbone twin silver crystals here. This is about a 10-centimeter specimen from Brian Lee's collection. This is very typical of the ore minerals from Aspen. On the left, we have a galena specimen with ablated barite crystals. There was a lot of barite in the Aspen deposits. Barite was one of the major gangue minerals. And the galena can be quite rich in silver as well. On the right, we have a typical specimen of native silver, small wires of native silver, and this is associated with acanthite. And there's probably some piercite there as well. Piercite is a silver mineral that actually has its type locality in the Aspen district. So we're going to move on down to Mineral County, down in the San Juans, and talk about Creed. So Creed has a fairly long history by Colorado standards. Way back in 1840, a gentleman named Tom Boggs, who is a brother-in-law of Kit Carson, was actually farming at what's now called Wagon Wheel Gap, which is close to Creed. So he spent a couple summers there, but he didn't really do any mining. However, in 1869, the first silver discovery was made at what was called the Alpha Mine. However, silver could not be extracted at a profit from the ores because the ores are quite complex geologically. So fast forward to 1889, there were discoveries of rich silver ores on West Willow Creek, and that started the Creed silver rush and the growth of Creed as a town. An interesting thing about Creed is that it had also a very colorful history as far as people. In the 1890s, a lot of the gambling houses in Denver were shut down. There was a reform law passed, and a lot of the gamblers actually left Denver and the kind of criminal underworld of the time and relocated to Creed. So people like Soapy Smith and Robert Ford, who was the person who was famous for killing Jesse James, Sidney Caplight, and other people kind of became this criminal underworld in Creed. And they were known for all kinds of swindles and illegal gambling schemes and extortion. And it was really kind of a wild time to be in Creed. And there was a lot of money flowing through the town. So people partied hard and gambled and did things of various legal status, kind of like mining towns today. So fast forward again to 1893. And surprise, surprise, the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act hurt Creed, just like it did the other Colorado silver towns. However, in Creed, there was a lot of production also of lead and zinc ores. So this kind of enabled Creed to do a little better than some of the other mining towns that were more dependent just on silver. The last really big event in mining history in Creed is the opening of the Bulldog Mine. And the Bulldog Mine opened back in 1962. And what was unique about the Bulldog Mine was that it was mining extremely high-grade native silver ores. So some of the early stopes back in the mid-60s on what's called the Puzzle Vein were mining stuff that was 30, 40, 50% native silver. I have seen specimens that were collected in that period that are 50 or 100 pounds and are over 50% native silver. I've seen specimens up to a loaf of bread size that are literally solid native silver from that period. So just unbelievable high-grade ores, and it was a vein that did not outcrop. It was found through drilling, and there's actually still some exploration happening there today through Hecla mining. So a couple nice specimens from Creed. On the left, we have a typical group of galena and amethyst crystals with sphalerite. This is from the Commodore mine, and many of these specimens were produced from about the World War II period up until about 15 years ago. This is a nice piece from Brian's collection, and Collector's Edge actually was lucky to form a sort of partnership back in 2001 when there was some environmental reclamation work going on. There was some EPA compliance work, and Brian, my boss, partnered with one of the former miners and was actually able to recover a lot of these specimens before the Commodore mine was closed off. So these are really classic with this nice contrast between the amethyst and the sulfide crystals. On the right is a fantastic specimen of wire silver from the Bulldog mine with a little bit of quartz there and acanthite. This is about 6 centimeters tall, and it's probably the best wire silver that's known from Creed. Some more photos of Creed specimens. Some of these I have taken from the wonderful Rocks and Minerals article from 2010, which I recommend all of you read if you want to learn more about Creed. On the left here, we have a nice specimen from Dave Bunk's collection, a kind of tangled mass of silver wires. It's about 7 centimeters. In the center here, you can see variation in sphalerite crystals, some really beautiful gemmy sphalerite crystals. On the lower left, we have this banded chalcedony, and the locals down there call this sow belly agate. It has a kind of bacon-like look. That basically this is epithermal banding. This is a low sulfidation epithermal vein is the type of deposit, and this type of banding is very characteristic for those kind of ore deposits. And some really nice amethysts as well. These are some nice dark amethyst crystals here with some sphalerite. So moving over a little bit to the west, we're going to talk about what's called the San Juan Triangle. And this is where I really did some lumping in this talk. You know, that the San Juan Triangle is such a diverse district and it produced so many good minerals and so many mines. I could do a whole separate talk just on this. So I'm just going to really briefly touch on some of the famous localities and the mines in the San Juan Triangle. That essentially the San Juan Triangle is part of the San Juan Mountain region, and that in turn is part of the San Juan volcanic field. And this volcanic field is a huge, huge volcanic feature in the western US. It includes about 15 different major calderas, and these erupted from 35 up to about 10 million years ago. And they produced hundreds of cubic kilometers of eruptive material. I mean, we're talking one of the biggest volcanic episodes on Earth, really. And it's still kind of a mystery as to how this volcanism originated. So starting back in the 1870s, the Hayden survey again identified some promising ore deposits in the San Juans, but it wasn't really until the 1880s when mining was started and towns such as Ouray and Silverton and Telluride were established. There were a lot of high altitude mines as well. So if you today drive between Red Mountain Pass, Ouray, and Silverton, you'll see some of these mines very high up. You'll see mine adits and mine workings up to like 13,000 feet, 13,500 feet. So they came up with some really interesting engineering ways of operating these mines and making it profitable. The early 20th century saw the establishment of major underground mines, such as the Camp Bird, the Dorado, and the Sunnyside mine. These are some of the famous mines that we associate with specimens as today. However, by 1970, things were kind of on the decline. A lot of these mines were closing, and you saw the economy shift more to the ski resort model and tourism, which is what it's focused on today. However, there are a couple mines that actually have reopened in recent history. One of them is the Revenue Virginius mine down in Ouray, and there's been some limited exploration as well. So there are some signs that there may be some future mining down in the San Juans. So rhodochrosite is obviously not limited in Colorado to the Sweet Home mine. In fact, many of the mines in the San Juan Triangle produce great rhodochrosite specimens. These are all from Brian Lee's collection. On the upper left, we have a nice specimen from the Sunnyside mine, I believe, with kind of druzy quartz, very typical. This kind of baby pink rhodochrosite, also from the Sunnyside mine in Silverton. This is very typical. That's a fairly large crystal. That's about 4 or 5 centimeters, I believe. This upper middle specimen here with quartz is from the Mountain Monarch mine, which is a little bit more of an obscure locale. That very nice pink rhodochrosite crystal, not typically gemmy, that beautiful pink, kind of opaque color. And on the right is another rhodochrosite from the Sunnyside mine. And what's interesting about this is you can see there's this quartz overgrowth, and then there's a preferential face there where the quartz is not overgrown, so it makes a really nice aesthetic piece. Some more specimens from the San Juan Triangle. On the upper left, we have a nice rhodochrosite on sphalerite. Lower left, we have an interesting quartz epimorph. So there are many, many varieties of milky quartz that occur in the San Juan Triangle. Ouray in particular is known for nice milky quartz crystals and also interesting epimorphs. So this, I believe, is from the amphitheater area above Ouray, and it's essentially a quartz epimorph after barite. So barite crystals grew, barite crystals were overgrown by quartz, and then the barite dissolved, and you end up with these epimorphs. This is a great specimen, a nice octahedral purple, green fluorite crystal with some rhodochrosite. That's a real classic from the Sunnyside mine. And then in the lower right here, we have some beautiful gemmy green sphalerite crystals from the Portland mine, which is in Ouray. And these are really beautiful sphalerite. They're on this white quartz matrix here. More nice specimens from Brian Lee's collection from the San Juan Triangle. The piece on the left, I think, has been on a couple show posters before. Big octahedral green fluorite crystals from the Sunnyside mine, and the matrix is a kind of bubbly pink rhodochrosite, kind of druzy rhodochrosite. Makes a really nice contrast. The specimen in the middle is from the Smuggler Union mine, and it's a fantastic example of leaf gold. So these are delicate leaves of crystallized gold that are in a little open vein in milky quartz. And the most famous specimen from this mine is in the Colorado School of Mines Museum. You can see it on exhibit. It's just beautiful. It looks like somebody took gold leaves and stacked them on top of each other. These are quite famous from this locality. On the right, we have an interesting specimen of crystallized gypsum, selenite gypsum with rhodochrosite from the Sunnyside mine. This is kind of an unusual combination, but really aesthetic with this clear gypsum with rhodochrosite going through it. Handful of more specimens from the San Juan Triangle. Again, I could do a whole sub-talk on this area. There's many, many, many important mineral occurrences down there. On the left is a great manganocalcite. This is from the Idorado mine. And on the right is also another nice Idorado mine manganocalcite. These fluoresce very nicely, and they usually occur in beautiful shades of pink, these pink manganocalcites. In the center here, upper, is a nice ore specimen that's showing the typical occurrence of gold in these veins. So the gold is quite fine-grained here. It's mixed in with quartz and also sulfide minerals. And this is a little bbit of a mineral called pyrox mangite, which is a manganese mineral down here. Below that is another nice milky quartz. Big milky quartz points. This, I think, is about 25, 30 centimeter specimen. And as far as milky quartz goes, the milky quartz from Ouray is probably some of the best in the world. One more slide of San Juan minerals here. We've got a nice green fluorite specimen here with some little rhodochrosite, nice enargite from the Longfellow mine, and then we've got a nice chalcopyrite here that's from the Idorado mine. So last district I'm going to talk about is the Somerville district. And Somerville is kind of off on its own a little bit. It was found back in 1860. A guy named Charles Baker was prospecting and found traces of placer gold at what was called Eureka, Colorado. However, they were forced out by the local Ute tribe Indians. Fast forward to 1871, lode gold was found at what was called the Little Giant vein. And in 1873, gold veins were found as high up as 11,500 feet. And the town was built, and mining kind of ramped up a bit. 1885, there were over 250 claims in operation, and mining was going along at a pretty good pace. However, pretty soon the town was kind of abandoned, and most of the high-grade veins were mined out. And it wasn't until 1984 that what you see in this scene here was created. And this is the result of open pit mining by a Canadian company called Glacic Resources. And they have kind of an infamous name in the mining world because they made a real mess at Somerville. They essentially acquired all this property, and they did a large heap leach operation using cyanide. The problem was that the cyanide was not adequately contained, and the acid mine drainage was not contained, and it contaminated a huge area. So this is a very controversial mine and kind of a low point, you could say, in Colorado mining history. But the upside of Somerville is that it is the home of Colorado's best cobalt specimens. And this specimen on the left here is from the Colorado School of Mines Museum. It's probably the best. I like to think it's the best cobalt in the world. It's certainly the best Colorado cobalt. These crystals are huge. This thing is like 20 centimeters. Big, blocky crystals of cobalt. Beautiful iridescence. Here's another nice specimen with some purplish crystals. Another neat thing from Somerville is the so-called Somerville gold boulder. And this was discovered in 1975 by a Sarco geologist doing some mapping. This contains over 350 ounces of gold, and it was literally found just sitting at the surface. So it goes to show you there's still some things to be found. And you can see this over at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. So that's all I have, and take any questions.